Public safety, is it Friday yet?
Wake up, mister.
Start over.
It's public safety, Mr. Engler, not budget.
Welcome to the budget portion of the Public Safety Finance Committee. This is Friday, December 14th, and I'm joined by my council member, Dennis P. Zine. I say my council member, I'm actually his council member, since he lives in my district,
That's true.
by the way. So my district actually has two council members living in CD 12. One that does a good job, the other one.
Which one is that?
All righty. It must be the Friday before the recess. What do you think? We don't yet have a quorum of the committee, and therefore anything we will do at this point in time, until another member shows up, will be the consent of the chair, although I do appreciate Mr. Zine being here
On time.
on time.
Yeah.
On time is Zine.
When I ventured in the parking lot, there were two cars, yours and mine.
That's right.
So
Yes.
that's where it's at.
And with that, therefore, if you're here for public comment, we don't have, since we don't have a quorum, if we do get a quorum, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. But at this point, it doesn't legally satisfy the Brown Act of the public comment requirements, and therefore, we cannot have public comment on any of the items or open public comment until we have a quorum. So with that,
Are we anticipating members?
I don't anticipate,
Joe?
I have no expectations on anybody, and therefore,
Okay.
we don't subject ourselves to disappointment. No, we perhaps might have a quorum shortly. With that, I've got several items on consent, and if we could, we'll go ahead and move items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with the technical changes on 7,
On the CO report?
correct? Item 9, 11, and 12, unless any of those items my colleague would like to call special. We'll go ahead and move those on consent.
Council members, items 9, 11, and 12 have CO reports that were submitted after the publication of the agenda. Do you wish to approve the CO reports for those items?
Yes.
And also, item 1, there are two ordinances on file. There is a November 16th ordinance and a December 5th ordinance. City Attorney recommends that you adopt the December 5th ordinance and receive and file the November 16th ordinance.
Correct. And item 1 is just some technical corrections and changes to items that were already approved on those fee changes, so just for the record. So we'll go ahead and move those items on consent. If you're here on any of those items, feel free to have a nice day. Thank you.
No way. This is going to help.
That'll leave us with items 8, 10, and 13 on the agenda this morning.
Item 8, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to the 2012 COPS Hiring Program Grant Award. You also have a CO report on this item.
Good morning. Ed Rose with the CIO's office. The report before you concerns a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, and the grant is for the 2012 Community-Oriented Policing Services, a.k.a. COPS Hiring Grant. The grant amount total is $6.4 million, and it's for a term of 3 years, and it will allow the city and LAPD to hire 25 full-time police officers, and it will cover the salaries and fringe benefit costs of the officers. There's no city match requirement, which is good, and the city must maintain the 25 officers in funded positions in the 4th year of the grant.
According to my notes, there is a city match. You're saying there's not a city match?
No,
There's a general fund impact on this?
yes, but the police department had requested a waiver of the match, and they were granted by the grantor, so there's no match.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm reading my notes here. It says the general fund impact for accepting the grant would be 2.8.
Yes, that's correct.
Over the 4 years.
over the 4 years. Yeah.
Right.
Which is 2.6, which is salaries and benefits, and the other 224,000 for one-time equipment costs.
And being that the CAO, now, well, one particular question, a couple questions, actually. One, is this time sensitive?
Yes, with the looming fiscal cliff situation hanging over the nation's head, it's a good...
Outside of that issue, I mean, is there a
Well-
deadline for accepting it?
We have given the COPS office a notification that we will be approving this by the mayor today, on the 14th, so we want to get it in. We've already had an extension of the grant previously, so we don't want to drag this on too long.
And is there modification adjustments allowable under this particular grant? So in other words, if in the next fiscal year, the city, if there's at some point in time, perhaps, that we aren't going to hire under the specifications of this grant, that we could readjust it if need be?
I believe there's some flexibility in there, Eileen.
Yes, there is. And to answer the prior question as well, Councilman, we've been notified by the COPS office that we are late in accepting the grant, and if we don't accept it, we are at risk of losing it.
And let me ask you, what caused the delay?
I'm actually not sure. We did get the documentation on time. I believe just our normal city process, the COPS office expected to have the acceptance right away and didn't understand that we had to get a CAO report presented to council before we could formally accept. They anticipated getting that acceptance in a matter of days, and we've asked for continuances to allow our process to go forward, and they have granted it, but they have told us if we don't accept it, we are at risk of losing it.
No, I understand that. One of my concerns, however, though, on this is that we get grants that come in that have a financial impact that we don't have the opportunity to fully review. The CAO report was just released after the notification of the agenda item, and I've got concern over that. I've brought this up over grants in the past. So what we'll do here then, in this case, if we could, is we'll accept it, though with the recommendation from the committee that this come back here for a review prior to the approval of the next fiscal budget, and then continue to monitor that we're meeting the requirements, or if there's any adjustment, therefore we won't get the adjustment in arrears and have to owe money back. And so if we could have it with an approval that it come back for an update prior to the approval of the next fiscal budget, and then a continuous update with that same element, just so we're on top of it. And the responsibility of this committee. I was going to suggest that it also be sent on to the Budget and Finance Committee, but given the time frames, I think we'll just go ahead and go with the update at this point, if that's acceptable. Is that reasonable?
Yes, Councilman, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. That'll be the action of this committee as recommended by the chair. Mr. Zine, do you have any questions on this as well?
Yes, the notes in the summary refer to September 11, 2001 military veterans with a minimum of 180 consecutive days active service. Do we need to then use that pool of military veterans? Is that what this applies? So they've got to be military veterans to qualify?
Yes,
Okay, so this isn't open to everyone, but it is open to military veterans.
that's correct.
Okay, good, because we do support our military. And also, these 25 officers will replace 25 non-general funded sworn officers assigned to the 4 Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, HACLA. So what does that part have to do with this? Because it talks about these 25 officers will replace 25 non-general funded sworn officers assigned to 4 of the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles Public Housing Development as part of the Community Safety Partnership. That's in the summary. So I'm trying to figure out how that blends in, because you got to be a veteran, which is great, but now we're talking about HACLA, and I know that the LAPD has made arrangements to have officers permanently assigned. How does that all blend in
I
here?
believe this replaces the 25. It doesn't supplant what the general fund is already providing the police
So
department.
these 25 will replace the 25 that are assigned to the housing?
Yes.
That's puzzling, because I thought the housing is paying for it.
It
So
is-
how does this all work out? If we took officers, here we go, here comes the lady with the answers. Because there's two conditions. Normally, I see these grants, I don't see the condition of the military activity, which is good, but then it's got this other aspect regarding the Housing Authority, HACLA.
Stella Laracas, LAPD grants section.
What section?
LAPD grants section.
Grants section, okay.
Yes. Actually, we have the 25 general funded officers before that went into the HACLA project.
Paid
So-
for by HACLA.
They were general funded before, so this program is a program that supports community policing. So what they intend to do is, in order to support this program, they are bringing in new hires to replace those people that were formerly general funded.
Is this reimbursed from HACLA is the question, I think, is what we're asking. Not paid for by, but is there a reimbursement from HACLA to LAPD or the general fund for those officers if they're dedicated?
I think the HACLA project is a separate project that's funded by HACLA.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If HACLA's paying for these officers that are working the housing, permanent assignment, and now we're talking about these 25 more, but they've also got HACLA in here. So I'm trying to figure out how that all pans out. I mean, if HACLA's paying for the 25, these 25 should be added to the deployment for regular operations.
Yes, for regular operations.
But that's not,
It's not what it says.
The 25 officers that went to the HACLA project
paid for by
You-
HACLA, reimbursed the city
by
for HACLA.
HACLA used to provide community policing in general patrol duties.
They weren't assigned to HACLA, they were just general
You-
patrol.
That's correct, prior
Okay.
to them going to HACLA.
Now we got another permanently assigned to the housing, paid
Yes.
for by
So
HACLA.
now this new hires
Is a gap.
will be filling that gap, the
Okay.
25 positions that were doing the patrol duties.
Okay, so now these 25 will take the place of the 25 that were gone. Okay. So somehow we'll have 25 additional personnel who are military trained to add to the department's
That's correct.
complement. Okay. Yeah, it just seems a little confusing how they worded that.
Well, the
Mr.
question-
Rose?
Yeah, and the question really becomes, is HACLA going to continue, or are they going to be reimbursing LAPD for the 25?
The ones that are now assigned to housing, how long is that funding going to continue from HACLA?
I have to check. I know there's an MOU between the departments on that, and I believe it's a course of years. My understanding is this grant is backfilling those general funded positions. The officers that were taken off to do HACLA, these positions are designed to backfill.
But that's-
That's my understanding.
But this grant is only for, since June, but then ongoing for the next 4 years.
Correct.
So can that information be obtained?
Yes, we can obtain it.
And do we have a holding place on council for this today?
Today.
Yes.
Can that information be obtained prior to council?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we can bring that information to council this morning,
we can clarify this
Can
prior to
clarify that.
council and make.
we'll go ahead and call it special at council and have the conversation, bring that to the table.
Is this the first time they used that military?
That's the
experience?
first time Congress has designated the COPS grants as specifically for veterans, yes.
Oh, okay, very good.
And that is a new condition,
So
but
for-
one we welcome, obviously.
So for new COPS grants, there will be that condition for military?
Well, for this COPS grant, and we are anticipating for future COPS grants as well. That's what
Look,
we're hearing.
It's a good idea to help our military that are leaving the service to come into civilian law enforcement.
Absolutely.
And it's supposed to help pay off, I think, student loans also. If you've got the military and you're then going into civilian that has something to do with public safety, there's
Ye-
an educational benefit.
Yes, that's right, too. As I understand, this was part of a full bill that Congress passed to provide additional benefits to veterans, including an educational component. But for this, what you are receiving today, it's just for hiring the 25 veterans.
So if you want to join the LAPD, you should become a military personnel, get that leadership experience, and then you can come join LAPD.
Absolutely.
There you go. Okay, thank you. It's good. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That answers the questions.
Okay? Excellent, thank you very much. Mr. Clerk?
Number 8, you wish to approve the CA report and with your added recommendation for a report back from LAPD and CAO prior to the adoption of the next city budget.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Next item is number 10. Communication from the mayor relative to the fiscal year 2012 UASI grant award in the amount of $50,654,524 from the Department of Homeland Security. You also have a CA report on this item that was transmitted to our office after the publication of the agenda.
Morning.
Morning. Janice Chang Yu, Office of the CAO. The report before you, we have a CAO report and a report from the Board of Police Commissioners, from the Mayor's Office regarding the 2012 Urban Area Security Initiative Grant Award. And what this funding is, the UASI grant program provides funds to governments to prepare, prevent, respond to, and recover from threats or acts of terrorism. And the City of Los Angeles receives the funding for the Los Angeles Long Beach urban area on behalf of approximately 27 partner jurisdictions and administers the funds and distributes the funding there. And what you're discussing today is approval of the acceptance of the grant funds. The total is $50.65 million over the performance period of October 12th, 2012 through May 31st, 2014.
Have we looked into, one of the questions is on, we were going to look into, and it was going to come back, and part of the, and I haven't heard back on it. It was a question that came up on a previous UASI grant on the radios to scramble, I think is, I don't remember the exact terminology we used in committee, the signal, so it couldn't be picked up on apps. And we brought it into committee and said that the UASI grants could probably apply for something like that. It was going to come back, and it hasn't yet. I haven't heard if there's been any research conducted on that whatsoever.
I have to admit, Councilman, I think I might have missed that meeting. You're talking about an encryption of some sort.
It was the
so that
encryption
others-
part that is already built into the system. It's just an added layer, so we encrypt the current radios we have. The radios and the hardware wouldn't be changed from what was reported, and we were going to look into the opportunity to strengthen our communication system with that as well. And I haven't seen anything on it. I've seen a couple of UASI grants come through the process since then, so I just don't know what the status of that might
And
be.
again, I have to apologize. I think I missed that meeting and wasn't aware of that report back, but I'll take responsibility to report back and work with fire and police on that so that you get an answer to that question. I believe that is part of the overall LA RICS project of looking at the security feature as well, but I know you're talking about more immediate future for right now. So I'll work with the fire and police departments and their radio folks to make sure you get that answer.
Okay. If we
And
can,
I apologize for
That's
that. I wasn't
if
aware of it.
we can include that in the committee recommendations, that part will come back as well, just so we have a note of it. It doesn't get lost. That'd be great. Mr. Zine.
Yes, this will connect with item number 13 regarding LA RICS, because if I'm looking at the list, 18.26 million, 1,105,000, 151,000. So I know this item is separate from item 13, but I think item 13 is going to refer back to some of the items on LA RICS. So I just wanted to mention if we could keep that in mind as we go to number 13.
Okay,
Thank you.
well noted. We'll go ahead and do that. I don't believe we need to go through all the items. We'll go ahead and approve.
We do have a, I'm sorry, Councilman, but we have a request
Technical
to-
change.
Yes, correction on recommendation number 6. There's funding provided, $157,505 provided to salaries sworn to the police department, and that funding has already been covered. This is part of, is a salary funding for the LA RICS project, and that funding is already covered by existing UASI grant funds for 1213, and so we don't need to move that money. And the only amount we need to move is the $359,500 for overtime sworn, and that covers instructors for training purposes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and approve the report and CAO's recommendations with the technical corrections that were submitted to the committee this morning. With the only other change that we'll report back on separately on the opportunity to look for the grant funding for encryption purpose. Okay, that'll be the recommendation from the committee. And then that takes us to the final item of the final meeting of the Public Safety Committee for 2012.
Item 13, motion Zion Wesson requesting that the CAO, CLA, Fire Department, and the Mayor's Office report relative to the status of the Los Angeles Regional Interoperable Communication System project, including grant funding allocation to the project.
Mr. Zine, being the mover of the motion, we'll go ahead and turn that over to you first.
Thank you. Thank you. This is probably the most frustrating project in the history of public safety. LA-RICS. And I can remember from the time this came about, interoperability, I was serving on the board at National League of Cities. We kept talking about it. And we don't seem to be making any progress. We come up with an idea, get a lawsuit, we go back, we scramble back. But I'm looking at the item that was just heard, number 10, when we're looking at $18.26 million and all the money. My focus on it is when are we going to finally get something done on the interoperability, because this money is going out, and by the time we come up with a plan to do something, there won't be any money left. And there's a shooting that took place this morning you may have heard about in another state at a school where they shot and killed the principal. Another situation, multiple agencies responding. They had the shooting that took place at the shopping center in Oregon this week. I mean, terrorism is alive and well in this country, and interoperability is a struggling situation that we need to overcome. So when the fire department's responding and the police department's responding and the tactics that law enforcement uses, the sheriff's department, LAPD, school police, whatever the case may be, interoperability is a huge issue that we haven't resolved, but I keep seeing money being spent to allocate for Information Technology Agency, 4 communications engineering associates, 3 communication engineering associates. I'm looking at all the expenditures, but we're not progressing. What is the problem? We need to finally come up with something to address this interoperability and not keep taking the millions and millions of dollars and accomplishing basically nothing. And that's coming from my perspective as an active reserve with the police department, along with my colleague, Mr. Englander. And interoperability is a huge issue that we're not seem to making progress. So we're spending money, we're assigning personnel, but we don't seem to be coming to the end of the road to say we're going to do something. Take it away.
Good morning, Patty Huber from the CAO's office. This has been a long, difficult road for the LA-RICS project.
You were in elementary school when we started this.
I wish. That would be nice, but thank you.
It was a can on the screen back then.
I mean, I'm frustrated as hell about this, to be honest with
And
you.
I would say the JPA as a whole is frustrated as well, but it has been things outside of its control to a large extent. We were very close, the JPA was very close to having a contract. The first RFP had been issued, negotiations had been completed, a draft contract was close to being completed and presented to the JPA board. However, there was a determination that there were issues with the RFP that put us afoul of state contracting law. And unfortunately, that was discovered at the end of the process, but necessitated that that RFP be canceled, restructured to correct for those flaws, and then reissued. And we were on a fast track with that second RFP, or the JPA was, and had issued the RFP, had a response, and was getting ready to start negotiations with the selected vendor on the second round when HR 3630 was adopted. And because of the provisions of that legislation, we had to stop. The biggest one being that HR 3630 calls for the selling off of T-band, which is the primary spectrum that was underlying the LA-RICS system. And so The question was, are we going to spend money to build a system that is essentially been legislatively made obsolete? And so we had to regroup and move forward. The third RFP for only the land mobile radio component. There was the land mobile radio, and then there was the broadband component. Because of provisions in HR 3630, the broadband is on hold and is being addressed through FirstNet on a more nationwide basis, and we continue to monitor where that's going. The land mobile radio RFP was issued in October, and responses are due in January, with the expectation of entering into a contract in June.
So June Gibson, who helped bring this along, thank you, June Gibson. I need to say that since you just entered the room. But the concern I have is we're spending money, but we're not accomplishing anything. How do we keep spending money, and we've got provisions to have more folks assigned, yet we're not making any progress? And that, I mean, this is like 2013 in a couple weeks. And it's like 10 years old, or 11 years old, or 12 years old, or whatever the case may be. And, whatever situations come into play, we're not moving down the assembly line. That's the concern. Yet we're still spending money, but we're not accomplishing the goal of bringing this interoperability to a final conclusion because of all the different factors. So the concern is, once we get people employed to do something, we expect a finished product. We're employing people, but there's no finished product. We're just kind of like throwing it away.
We have been making incremental moves in the direction of the final interoperable system. The staff that we have been paying for from UASI is working on the overall project. They've been involved in the RFPs, they've been involved in the evaluations and negotiations on the previous efforts, but as well, they have been working and identifying interim projects that we have reprogrammed UASI monies. So we've programmed UASI monies to the LA-RICS project, or I shouldn't say we, it's the UASI Approval Authority has done so. And as we've come up against funding deadlines, we've looked at projects that could be implemented that help support the end system that we expect to get out of this process. And Eileen is here and can give you some more details because she is a whiz at doing.
So if the controller does an audit on LA-RICS and UASI and what we spent, what we've accomplished, is that going to make the city look bad?
Well, actually,
I think it will make us look very good.
I'll address all of the issues.
All of my
I think
frustrations.
in the order in which you presented them, hopefully. Just to add what the CAO's office mentioned on HR 3630, to give you a slightly broader perspective, I think that legislation was passed because of Congress's nationwide frustration over interoperability. I think they share your frustration that you have for the city of Los Angeles. They have it nationwide in terms of creating interoperability, and that legislation was designed to get everyone on the same spectrum. That's a starting point, that we have to have our first responders on the same spectrum. Unfortunately for us, instead of taking away the other spectrum, they're taking away ours. And that was the foundation for the last RFP, and that's why it had to be taken back, restructured, rewritten, and reissued. With respect to the projects, we've been working very closely with DHS and CalLima, excuse me.
Tell the mayor you're busy.
We could take a recess if you need to grab.
No, I apologize for
That's
that.
all right.
I thought I had turned it off.
No problem.
With respect to the projects, we've been working very closely, both with LA-RICS, the UASI Approval Authority, the first responders, to define what DHS has called carve-out projects. Core projects that can be used for the overall infrastructure in the end of LA-RICS to help it succeed, but projects that can be used now. In other words, they're not going to stay in a box for years till we see if LA-RICS succeeds, that it is systems that can be used now. And those projects include upgrading our secondary responder network to make it P25 compliant, which was a federal requirement. It includes fiber infrastructure, microwave infrastructure, infrastructure that does not compete with the LA RICS RFP, but is core to making it successful, kind of like getting generators for I'm not technical enough to give an example, but like for Mount Lee. That does not impact whatever LA RICS is going to do on Mount Lee for the radio system that will be employed, but it's very necessary to have that system work. So we've been working to create what's called, DHS calls these carve-out projects, so that we are spending the grant money in a very thoughtful way, and it is at all times with their approval, with their consent, both DHS, Cal Lima, and then locally, we go through the JPA is very well aware of what's going on, the LA RICS JPA. And with respects to audit, we are audited consistently by the Controller's Office, by DHS OIG, and Cal Lima. In fact, since September, we've gone through, I tried to count, I think it was 46 audits this year. Since September of this
And that only cost us $18.26 million. I'm being facetious. I'm saying that cost us $18.26 million for all the audits.
No, the audits are actually extraordinary because they help us obviously keep track of the money, make sure we're employing best practices, and that we are following all the many rules and regulations that DHS and Cal Lima do impose on the spending on these grants.
And they keep changing the rules.
And they keep changing them, and we have to keep up with them. So the audits actually I find very welcome, to be frank, just to be sure we're doing all the right things. So I think I've addressed the issues that you presented in the order, hopefully to your satisfaction. But
Well, I'm just concerned for the fire department, for the folks that are out in the field, the police officers. And we keep on having these situations take place where there's multiple agencies that respond because of the, shall we say, the situation. We have we have mutual aid with the fire departments, major fires, law enforcement, things that are happening in the news, and you've got multiple agencies that respond, and we're in a region where we have multiple law enforcement agencies, multiple fire agencies, and that interoperability is to say that everybody could switch, and now we've got coordination, and we're not stumbling over each other. And it's frustrating that they started this way back September 11th to try and bring it up to date. And when I was on National League Board of Directors, that was one of the highlights that we really wanted to push forward to say, let's get this done. So there was an address at the national level, and California League of Cities, and Independent City Association, all the associations, and then the people in the field who deliver the service, they're using what equipment we provide, yet there's that big disconnect. And then every time I see money being spent, I say, okay, when are we going to get it done? So we'll finally come to the completion. It's like you're trying to build a car, and you only have 3 wheels, and it needs 4, and you can't come up with the 4th wheel. It's just, that's the frustrating part, and especially when we see more and more situations taking place, which call for multiple agencies to get involved for the public safety sector. So the RFP's out again, and hopefully they'll come up with a conclusion, and then we can start moving forward to make this happen, because it doesn't seem to be that difficult, but it's taken over 10 years. That's the issue. And the money we've spent nationwide on this has got to be multiple millions of dollars to this point, but we still don't have what was originally designed with the fire department. Can I hear from you folks on it?
Sir, in regards to your question on interoperability, within the city of Los Angeles, LAFD and LAPD is interoperable for large-scale emergencies, so we can't communicate with each other.
You can or can't?
We can. The concern and moving forward with the LA RICS project is that regional interoperability, and that's what the intention is with a P25 compliant system countywide. So,
But we also have the ability, just so people are on true concern and alert, that in a major disaster emergency, we have mobile units that can roll out and tie all the frequencies together.
that is correct.
So we have that technology. In fact, Mr. Zine and I were at a conference where we went and looked at that technology, and it exists, and we have it here, so people shouldn't be on that concern. But that's for major disasters, not everyday functions. But the other part of that is and I looked at, thinking about your analogy, Mr. Zine, was a car with 3 wheels. Well, I've seen his motorcycles, but that's another.
Only got 2.
But it's more like traveling in an airplane, and we're building it as while we're in flight. And so, you can't shut it down completely to rebuild it, and we have to continuously add on, and those are the carve-outs. And the carve-outs, as I see it, though, here's the difference, is the carve-outs are, those parts are becoming greater than the whole. In other words, that, at some point, gets to a point where it dictates the hardware and the operation and the backbone of the system, because we've added on so much to it that we won't be in an opportunity to go in a different direction at some point. I don't know if we've passed that point or where we're at with that, but the carve-outs become the system.
We've been very concerned with that and have been working with the ITA folks who are assigned to the project to ensure that we are staying separate from the system, but providing fundamental infrastructure that would be needed. In other words,
I mean, at some point, if we go back to Mr. Zine's analogy of that, it's if you will, it's if we're building that car, we've now picked out the engine and we've rebuilt the engine, we've done the full interior and the electrical system. At some point, we're just picking what color it is, and the system's built. I mean, we get to that point.
We're nowhere close to that.
No.
Given what LA RICS is trying to be, it's an enormous project that we're very hopeful will succeed, but it's a quite significant technological project. What has been happening so far is nowhere comparable to the vision of LA RICS. Is that, you're on the JPA?
I would agree. I mean, what we're doing is the bottom layer of infrastructure that improves the assets that would be going into the system, but at the end of the day, there's all of the design of the radio frequencies and all of those kinds of things that still has to happen that define the system. We're doing infrastructure improvements, cell tower improvements, generators, hardscape, but those aren't the design. It's not really the meat of a radio system. That comes into the frequencies and how they're all out. It's more than I can explain.
Well, it's very, there's no question, it's very complex, but you look at the television industry, how the television bands changed, and then you could get a little computer box, and now all the TVs have, we changed it nationwide, the way that a television signal is delivered to the homes around the country. Then you got the cable televisions and the multiple layers. The private sector has seemed to be very successful in bringing it about, and the government entity seems to be struggling to try and do something. We're not talking about the visual, it's just about audio, that they can transmit a television signal in HD, and we can't seem to get interoperability on the mobile communication, on voice, in critical situations that take place. That's one of the problems, that the private sector, and I remember Z Channel, if you remember that, there was one channel, it was a cable, it was called Z Channel, you had one channel, and then the cable industry, now you got hundreds of channels. They've been successful doing it, yet we're still trying to get voice communication resolved on a nationwide level for public safety, which is, to me and my colleague here, critical when we have to respond to whatever situation takes place. So just to get an update to see if we're moving forward, we see the money being expended, that we're not just spinning our wheels and not accomplishing anything. And when Congress intervenes and they come up with a new regulation and they come up with this, I mean, they can't figure out, as we're heading to this fiscal disaster, and I heard that the part of the negotiation team has gone home for the holiday, which means that if we hit that fiscal disaster, meanwhile, we'll have more problems to deal with, and we're on a local level just trying to maintain public safety and give the resources to the people who deliver that public safety, whether it's fire or police and both, to make sure we can deliver when situations take place. So
Let me turn that into a question and ask, is there a timeline, a historical perspective of what's occurred to date, and then what objectives and milestones we're trying to hit in the future? Is there something that exists through either the partnership, and is that something that can be shared, if there is one that exists?
been presentations along those lines
Yeah.
that we can get for you, yes. Made to the LA Ricks JPA, for example, of what has been accomplished in the past, including the creation of the JPA.
And then what's left to do, and what
what's left to do.
those timeframes and what our those goals might be, and when we hope to hit those and what they mean.
The expectation for our contract, and yes.
Great.
Then there's the possibility of litigation if someone gets
Of course.
it and someone doesn't get it, and they file litigation, then June Gibson says, well, when am I going to retire to make this happen?
Right.
Most likely that'll happen. But in any event, if you could share that information, and if you can just, perhaps even just a briefing, I don't know that we have to bring this back into committee for that purpose, for the timeline, but if you can share that with both of our offices.
We'd
and
appreciate that.
That would be great. That'd be very helpful. So at least we get a better understanding of exactly what's occurred, but what still needs to happen, and what are the goals and when they're going to happen. And that'll give us a much better understanding of where we're at today and what we have to do as this keeps moving forward, what's left on the table.
And is there infighting with the JPL, the JPA? Is there, like, do they all get along in that?
They all get along, but there's differences of
Depends on who
opinion,
you talk to.
certainly.
That's what, the
Absolutely.
difference of opinion.
They all get along, but they just don't agree.
Differences of opinions, because I remember from Independent City Association, they had some issues, and you look at all these agencies coming together, it's like everyone.
It's a challenge, but, for our region, I think a lot has happened to bring everyone together, but there's many more challenges to overcome, certainly. But in many ways, because I've been studying other regions around the United States, in many ways, we are in a very good position to overcome it, much more so than some other regions, believe it or not.
I believe it. So, very good. Thank you for
Great, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and receive and file.
Thank
The
you.
report, with the understanding we'll get the timelines and the historic perspective as well as the future objectives presented to our offices respectively.
Thank you.
And with that, that will conclude the Public Safety Committee for 2012. So everybody have a happy holiday. Make sure you compliment Mr. Zine on his sweater vest today. He's very festive. And if you hold on to that long enough, it will come back in style. All right, thank you.
And then I'll I know regardless, that's
Look at your beard.
Well done.